We all make mistakes in photography, and nothing wrong with that, nothing to be ashamed of. But don't make the same mistakes twice. In this video I will tell you 5 typical mistakes that beginners and also those who have been photographing a bit longer usually make. And I also will give you a solution. So 5 tips coming up. Hi there, my name is Peter Forsgard and I am an Olympus visionary and a professional photographer from Helsinki, Finland. And before we start talking about those 5 mistakes that most of us make, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell so you get notified when there is a new video online. My channel is all about you getting to be a better photographer and also about Olympus gear. But let's start. And the first mistake is that your image doesn't have a subject. What I mean by that is that it's an image where you don't have any particular place for the eye to start and finish. So it doesn't have any guides where the eye should wander and it doesn't find anything interesting. And those images are usually quite boring. Having something in the foreground will lead your eye or the viewer's eye to the image and finds the subject. Maybe there's a river, maybe there's a road that leads the way into the image, and without that most images are really boring. If anything, in the front, in the middle and in the back where you have layers, then your image is a lot more interesting and it's not most likely a very dull image. And it is all about composition, and I have a video on my channel about that. If you want to learn more about composition, you can watch it from there. And the second one is flat and not so interesting light on your photograph. This is a very close to the one that I said before about the no subject and boring images, because flat light and no shadows, no highlights usually make your image look two-dimensional. And with light and shadows you can make it more three-dimensional, and that's a thing that makes the image a lot more interesting. And also our eye seeks to the brightest part of the image, so try to have your subject on the brightest part of the image. That usually requires light or certain type of light that will make that subject lighter than the rest of the image. Of course you can do something in edit, and you should, maybe vignetting a bit and emphasizing the brightest part in the middle of the image. That would usually help for the eye to find the right place and make the image more pleasing to the eye. So image without any shadows most likely doesn't have any light either. So those images are boring. And that comes to my third thing. You need to be patient. And what I mean about being patient is that think before you click the shutter. So think before you click. That way you have time to observe the surroundings. Maybe you need to wait for the perfect light to come, because usually, I don't know if you've seen a lot of landscape photographers when they make YouTube videos, they always say that, okay, they go early to the place and they know that in a couple of hours there will be light or not, but that's what they're catching. They're catching the light, and then of course the composition, and that is something that they do for the 2 hours. They fine-tune the composition, then they wait for the perfect light. Rushing to an image usually makes it bad. Do not rush. Be patient, and that will pay off. So patience will pay off. And the fourth thing is not having the correct exposure. I've talked a lot on this channel about the correct exposure. There are lots of videos about this, but I think it's an important thing that should be addressed on every video, because having the correct exposure will give you the best possible image to start editing. And of course, if you are shooting JPEG, correct exposure might be a bit a different thing. Well, it's not a different thing, but it is achieved with a different method. And there is a video about, it's over there, there's a video about that also on my channel. But modern cameras have lots and lots of ways to make sure that your image is perfectly exposed. You've got the histogram, so learn about the histogram. Learn about if you have zebras or flag colors to make it easier for you to make the perfect exposure. There's no excuse of underexposing or overexposing with digital cameras, because you got all this information available. So don't trust on the LCD or the EVF for the exposure. Trust the metrics, the histogram, zebras, and flag colors. And before we talk about the fifth mistake, there will be a sixth mistake on this video. Well, that didn't sound too good. There are probably more mistakes than 6 on this video, but I'm talking about the mistakes that beginner photographers and a bit more experience also make. Always look around your subject, what's behind it. So look also what the background has, so that there is no distracting elements around your head of your subject or whatever the subject is, that there is no branches or trees or lampposts behind the subject that will distract the viewer's attention away from the subject. Of course, if that's the case to make a funny image, then it's a different thing, but usually you don't want that. So always look around your subject to see what's right behind it, so that there are no distracting elements. That will improve your photographs quite a lot. And also a narrow depth of field will help with that. So learn to use the aperture so that you will have the depth of field that you want. Sometimes you might want to have a lot and sometimes not, but that also is something to work with the background. So you will hide things with a shallow depth of field and reveal things with a deeper or more depth of field in your image. Remember, always look around your subject so that there is no distracting elements that you do not want there to be. And then the sixth mistake, which might be a bit controversial. Do not think that manual mode is a holy grail of photography. Of course, it's important to understand how the exposure triangle works, that you have the shutter speeds, the aperture and the ISO, how they are combined together. But I've heard so many times that people think that when they're using manual mode, they are kind of better photographers. And even some has said that if I can master the manual mode, I can use any combination. But that's not true, that's false. You cannot. It all depends on how much light you have in the scene, in the indoors, outdoors, whatever it is. How much light there is, that determines your exposure values. But having a manual mode won't change that. You still have the limitations that the light that you have makes to your exposure. So the best way for what I think is using aperture priority or shutter priority and then compensate the exposure with the exposure compensation. That will be the same thing as manual, but a faster and a better way. If you need to control the depth of field, then your aperture priority, and if you are photographing something that you need a certain shutter speed, then use shutter speed a priority, and then make the exposure compensation the way you want to make it. I have it set it on the back wheel of my camera, so it's really easy to adjust the exposure with my thumb. And I think that's the best way. But of course, sometimes manual is a good thing, like studio strobes, or if you want to have exactly the same shutter speed and the same aperture on every photograph, then of course it might be the thing to do. But don't think that using manual mode makes you better, or think that you are a better photographer because you can use manual mode. I hope this video was helpful, and avoiding these 5 or 6 mistakes can make you a better photographer a bit faster. And here are the videos that I mentioned in this video. You might want to watch those to get some more information about some of the topics or some of the mistakes that I was talking about in this video. But hey, thanks for watching and bye for now.